We clump together in our sorrow. In joy, we may wander off in our separate directions, but in sorrow, we prefer to hold hands.
Welcome to the Busy Girls Book Club. We are a podcast that rates and reviews Book Talk's most popular books and tells you whether or not you should take the time out of your busy schedule to read them. I'm Catherine.
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Casey. So today we are reading Tom Lake, which was written by a very famous author, Ann Patchett. She is sort of an interesting book talker who owns a bookstore and also makes book talks about books she loves. So a very popular author just in the fiction universe and also on Book Talk. And we are reading Tom Lake by her, as I said, which is sort of like a generational story, which is set in COVID times, but explores the kind of teenage or young adult coming of age of the mother in the story, who has kind of an opportunity to become a very famous actress and is in this movie and like kind of does the Hollywood thing and then ultimately decides to be a cherry farmer with her husband instead. So yeah, it's just kind of follows her journey and her relationship in particular with an actor who ends up becoming really, really famous, like sort of like the Ryan Gosling of his generation. And she dated him this one summer, and then we follow that summer, which ends up being really foundational to her career and why she ends up not becoming an actress. So yeah, how did you guys rate, or did you guys oh my God, word salad. Do you guys have reviews?
Yes, I do have a review. It took me a while to find a good 1-star review. Most of them were just like DNF, too boring, which I could see where people who like action and plot would struggle with this book. But this one I found funny. It's a 1-star on Goodreads, and it says, "This book was bland like a stale Ritz cracker."
LOL.
I have two. I have a short one that I just liked, and then a longer one that I feel like it's very similar to how I feel. So the short one is 4 stars, a happy pandemic novel. That's groundbreaking, not sarcastically.
Yeah.
And then the one that I liked was 3 stars. It says, "This book was a little boring to me. The best things about it were the descriptions of beauty in Michigan and insights into the relationship between a mother and her 3 grown daughters. If you have never seen or heard of the play Our Town, as I had not, you missed probably a very deep connection and symbolism. Patchett tries to connect you to it through descriptions, but it still doesn't quite hit for me, and unfortunately, it is referenced heavily throughout the book. I also liked the current version of the mother, but thought the youthful version of her was irritating in many situations. Beautifully written, but not a memorable story for me." I also have never seen or know the context of Our Town, and that made it very hard.
I also don't, and I sort of just ignored it the whole time. I was like, whatever, I'm not looking into this. But it would definitely help because it's a huge part of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I did forget to find a review, so I'm just snagging a quick 5-star right now just because it's easier. But here we go. 5 stars, made me miss my mom. Fantastic ex-theater kid literature.
Very theater kid-esque. Yeah.
I will say, the reviews rave, and I was told this by someone in person, rave about the audiobook.
Yes.
Meryl Streep is the narrator of this audiobook.
I listened to the audiobook. She's fantastic.
Yeah. I feel like maybe, I don't know, maybe that would have helped me, but.
Yeah, no, the audiobook bumped it up a star. I'm not going to lie, just because imagining Meryl Streep as a failed actress on a cherry farm in Michigan with her 3 daughters, and she plays the part so fucking well. Like, I'm like,
I mean, it's essentially her being in Mamma Mia.
That's true. With less singing.
Yeah. I wish there was singing. That would have been fun.
Okay.
Okay. So the overall Goodreads rating of the book is 4 out of 5, and the overall Amazon rating is 4.2 out of 5. Where did you guys come down?
Am I the lowest?
I think you're the lowest, Caitlin.
You're the lowest, yeah.
Okay. I was 3 stars. It's not that I disliked the book. It's that I took me like half the book to really get on pace reading, figuring out when she was switching like time periods and stuff. It was kind of hard to adjust to. Maybe it was easier on the audiobook. Also the end left me wanting a lot more. I feel like there was stuff left that I would like to know that weren't answered, and that kind of irritates me. And yeah, I just had no connection to this play that was like foundational to the book. She names her first child after the character she played in this play. I also had no reference for the other play towards the end. So I don't know. I feel like I could have got more out of it had I had a better background. I still enjoyed it though, like just not my favorite. So 3 stars.
I'm the middle child here. I gave it 4 stars. Um, Honestly, I was considering between a 3 and a 4 until I started listening to Meryl Streep's voice tell me the story, and then it became an instant 4. Um, I understand like where people say it's boring because it was hard. I struggled in the beginning to get into the story. Um, just because like it's a very like tale of life and tale of like this one woman's life, which I found her teenage self to be a little naive and grating at times because I'm like, you're an idiot for thinking that these men don't like
She
work.
was like in her 20s, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, you poor, innocent woman. But once I started listening to the audiobook around like chapter 7, it was a great experience. And I especially love the moments where Meryl Streep pretends to be the daughters as well. So there's like this back and forth between her and the daughters, all the same voice, obviously. But yeah, Meryl does the best ever for this book. So it's a 4 stars for me.
I gave it 5 stars. I loved this book. I like loved it, loved it, loved it. And I was really surprised by that actually. I thought I was gonna hate it because I don't know anything about theater. I've seen like 2 plays my entire life. I didn't know, and I hate theater to be clear, like 2 plays because that was all I could take. Um, and so I really didn't think I was gonna like the book at all. And then for me, I think what really sucked me in is the COVID family stuff because their family reminded me so much of my own family that it like really hit a chord with me. And we used to spend summers on a family friend's farm. And so it was like the perfect key of nostalgia for me, like really, really made me feel some type of way, like and resembled my own childhood very closely. Um, and then I really liked the coming of age story. I feel like it's a very, very different type of coming of age story, which I give it a lot of props for because it's about someone not living their dream and actually being happier that way. And I thought that was really, really cool. And I really enjoyed that. I do get why other people don't like it. Like it is slow. It is kind of slice of life. Like, but it was funny. It made me laugh. Like, I don't know, it was perfect for me.
High praise.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, shall we dive into our non-spoiler discussion?
Let's. Is it more plot or character driven, y'all?
Character.
Very character driven.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
It's probably another reason it wasn't
Character
my
story.
favorite.
Yeah.
Y'all know me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually surprised the ratings were as high as they were. I didn't know if you guys would like it or not after I
I
finished it.
liked it. It's just like not my favorite book.
Right.
A 3 is like, yep, that's good.
This book is very almost coded to me because I related to like almost every facet. My whole mom side of the family is from Michigan, so I know
Yeah.
the area very well. I have been to Traverse City and all of that beauty and ate at the cherry festivals and the cherry farms and the fudge. Like I just it reminded me of childhood almost. And I also do know our town actually. I auditioned with Emily's monologue in the third act for one of my acting role like auditions when I was in 6th or 7th grade. And it's the monologue where she is realizing she's dead and she's trying to speak to her mother and her mother can't hear her and they're just in a church. She's just like, Mom, look at me, please look at me. And it's a
Oh
very
my gosh.
heart-wrenching scene. And so I do know Our Town very well. I don't remember the monologue in
This sounds so depressing.
It is a very depressing play, because she dies in childbirth and is stuck in the graveyard as the stage manager kind of explains that no one can see her anymore and she's just a waif.
I feel like maybe she should have put some like a summary of Our Town in the book.
Yeah, that might have been helpful.
You know, it really didn't bother me. Like, I did not bother to Google Our Town at all. And I felt like I just got the vibes enough that it didn't really matter. Like, I got who Emily was as a character. Like, oh, she's kind of the good girl who has potential,
I
but
got
gets
it
trapped in this
enough,
town.
but unlike you, I do like theater, so I wouldn't have minded a little bit more.
Yeah.
I was a theater adjacent kid, aka pit orchestra. But like
Yeah.
all my cousin is like she's at NYU for musical theater. Like I go to the high school plays for fun, like well the musicals. More of a musical, less of a play person. But
Fair enough.
so I was kind of like,
Our Town is a
can't picture it.
long play. I'll say
I
that.
know they
With not
mentioned
a
how
lot
it
of
had
character.
like
Two intermissions.
intermissions. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, 3 acts, 2 intermissions. And there's not a lot of characters and not a lot of set. Like there's a ladder, there's basically a couple of chairs. The stage manager stays on stage the entire time to tell you the entire setting and scene. It's very beautifully written, but I read it as like a book preparing for my monologue. So I've never actually seen it acted out. I've only like read it as a novel almost.
So you're telling us you did not get the part?
No, well, it wasn't. I chose to read for Emily because my mom recommended it to me. She was like, I think you would relate to this character. It was for a class to get into like a class at the acting school.
Interesting.
There's this whole side of Catherine we are just now
I
discovering.
know.
I did not get in, so don't take it too far. But yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm still like kind of shook right now. So, okay. Sorry, we totally diverged. It's character driven. As we talk about the character. Have you or would you read other books by the author? I personally have not, but have wanted to for a long time. There's one, The Dutch House, I think I would like to read. I hear that is probably her best work. I actually ended up owning this one because my sweet parents went to Nashville around when this book came out and went to, unbeknownst to me, Ann Patchett's bookstore, Parnassus Books, and got me a signed copy of it for Christmas just because they thought, that's a famous author. Maybe Caitlin would like it. So it's very sweet. So I finally got to read it while I pound through podcast books.
I have also not read any of Anne Patrick's books, but I did hear about Bel Canto, and I've been interested in that as well. But The Dutch House is her highest rated one, so that's probably my next read from her because I did like this book.
I'm in the same boat. I never had. She'd been on my list for a long time and just had never gotten around to it. But I was really impressed. I thought for some reason her books would be more boring than I thought they were. I feel like I thought I was going to be like Caitlin and ended up loving it. So I definitely want to read more of her books.
It's okay to be like me.
Yeah, and not as a critique. Just thought I would have felt differently.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'd still read more of her books, but it's not like I disliked it. Just like
Right. And some of her other premises are a little bit more actiony, so there's probably a better balance between it all in there.
Yeah.
This was a COVID book.
Yeah, it was.
It was paced like the COVID pandemic, correct?
It totally.
Actually, speaking of, how was the pacing of the book and how long did it take you to read? I accidentally did that, but
that was so good. Great trend.
So smooth. Yeah. I think I got through it pretty quickly. It's not super long, but it is more like, I'd say it's a steady pace, but it's a steady, slow pace. So I didn't hit any parts that were boring or that I didn't like. I think it took me 3 days to read. But it's definitely not like a page turner. It's just sort of like an ongoing journey.
Yeah, it took me a little over a week to read, like 10-ish days, just because I picked it up, started the beginning. The beginning was really, really slow. So I was just kind of like not that interested, and then had to pick it up for the podcast. And that's when it was crunch time. So I started listening to the audiobook. Thankfully, my mom had already bought both of those. So I did not have to pay any money for this. Thank you.
ACO is with good taste.
Yes.
Yep.
Stacey liked this book. Stacey is from Michigan, so she very much enjoyed the scene setting because this was her childhood. But she grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, so not on a cherry farm.
East Detroit? No.
No, not East Detroit. No, West Bloomfield. Yeah, so it took me about 10 days, but once Meryl Streep came into the picture, a day.
I don't know. This probably took me a week or so. Just because also I was busy and because like the mom, there's these natural breaks because they are taking breaks telling the story in the book. So like they're kind of, despite it being like longer chapters and kind of a tricky back and forth at first, there were natural places to like put it down. Not in a bad way, like you said, like it wasn't a page turner, but it wasn't something that I was like, oh my gosh. So I don't know, it took me like probably a week of just fairly consistent short reads.
Right. Would you watch a movie or TV show of the book? Or a play of the book?
No plays.
No play. No, I don't think it plays well.
Play within a play. No, I'm kidding. I would watch it as a play.
I think it'd be a cool limited series.
I also think it could be a cool limited series. I'd also watch it in movie form, I think. I love
the flashbacks would be easier to understand.
Right. Have any of you guys seen My Old Ass? It's a movie.
No.
Sorry, it has a really funny name. It's actually a really good movie. It like won best screenplay at the Oscars or something. But it has oh my God, and it has that girl from Parks and Rec in it.
Amy Poehler?
No, I can't believe I'm blanking on her name. It's the one who's like goth and then marries Andy.
Aubrey Plaza.
Aubrey Plaza. Aubrey Plaza is in it. Anyway, I just wanted to bring it up because what I envision the cherry farm like is sort of how I thought My Old Ass was, because it's set in the cranberry farms in Canada on this like giant idyllic lake. And so it's like gorgeous. And then it's a coming of age story where the main character's family, like she grows up on this farm and then they end up selling the farm and she's like saying goodbye to it. But just the way that movie is like filmed and set up with like the beautiful natural landscape is sort of how I imagine they would do the cherry farm, with like the gorgeous and the lakes and the, you know, beautiful trees and hills.
I did learn a lot about cherries, which I don't often consume, but
oh, I love a cherry.
Cherry season in Michigan, 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Okay.
All right. And that's where we pitch to you our reading retreat hosted. No, I'm just kidding.
Come to Tom Lake with us.
Does Tom Lake exist? I'm not actually sure about that.
We'll each be assigned a part in our town. No.
Yeah, no thanks. So, but it is time for Busy Girl rating. What do y'all have, a Busy Girl rating?
I'm gonna stick with my 3. Like I said, there are a lot of natural breaks. Also, it took me a minute to get into the flow of it, but also I still liked it. So I'm gonna stick with a 3.
I'm gonna split mine. If you're the audiobook, it's a 4 or 5. If it's the regular book, it's a 3 for Busy Girl, because you can listen to Meryl Streep's voice anytime, anywhere.
Fact.
I'm gonna only drop mine 1. I'm gonna give it a 4 for Busy Girl. It's definitely like not the fastest paced book in the world, and you probably need a few days to read it. But I think the fact that there's natural places to put it down and pick it up is good for a busy schedule. Also, you know, none of us had trouble really getting through it. And I think it's a really cute story.
Catherine literally said she had trouble getting through it without Meryl Streep.
Oh, all right. Well, I take it back. I didn't have trouble getting through it. And yeah, I think it's really good if you're looking for a cozy read. I think it's probably, if you don't want something action-packed explicitly, it's probably like would be the number 1 book I'd recommend you. So,
wow. Okay.
High praise.
Well, let's find out why Casey liked it so much. Are we ready for our spoiler section?
I'm ready.
Okay. First question. So the mom in the story who is picking cherries with her daughters, her grown daughters that are home from college during the COVID pandemic, and telling them the story of the time she was almost really famous. And they have all these questions. Her name is Laura. I don't know how you, but it used to be Laura with a U. She changed it for acting, and the kids didn't even know that, which I found hilarious. But what did we think of our main character, and did you like her differently, adult versus young adult?
Well, yes, I definitely liked her more as an adult.
I thought
So,
she was so wise and like an amazing mother because she was like keeping things from her kids, but for their own benefit. And she told the story. She wasn't keeping things or hiding things. She was just like waiting for them to age up in order to tell the story in its almost entirety. She obviously kept some things to herself, but it's her story to tell. And I thought, considering like her relationship with each of her daughters was so different, and how her and Emily were like butting heads, and like Emily was so convinced that her father was not her father and was this famous actor, like to have the grace to allow your child to have this tantrum and to be hormonal and be crazy
For
without for
years.
years without burning that bridge, like you have to be a saint. And that kind of almost made me forgive her younger self for being so naive and stupid.
okay, I do want to, yes, her younger self was very naive and stupid. I do want to make a play to defend it a little bit because this is something that my mom has told me before. And my mom is like roughly the age of Laura. And so I feel like I already said this, but I partly love this book just because I loved the family and the portrayal of the family dynamic so much that it like hit like a little chord. But she is growing up before the internet and she's from a tiny little town. And even as she's acting and going and living in bigger cities, she's not involving herself with people that are like crazy and partying and blah, 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 blah. So my mom was basically, she told me this before the internet, you could stay kind of ignorant and childish and like sheltered forever because there was no real like place to go to expose yourself to like bad things or to people who wanted to hurt you. Like would be sheltered until, something happened to you basically. And so that's kind of how Lara was. She just wasn't really involved with bad kids. She was a good kid and she hung out with good kids and then she grew up and was kind of a loner as she like figured out her adult life acting. And so I think it's defensible that she was like that. Did it make her the most likable character all the time? No.
I also think part of the reason she seems kind of like immature is because everything is happening to her. She just
Mm-hmm.
like the only one big decision she ever makes is she gets tired of hearing all those people audition for Emily in high school in
Yeah.
auditions. And that kind of just triggers this little like, oh, I'll play Emily again. And then she's discovered and then she's in a movie and then she's sent to Tom Lake and like almost to a point where she becomes like she has like no sense of agency herself,
Mm-hmm.
where it becomes frustrating. But like I think that's why she seems a little immature is because a lot of these decisions she just kind of like let happen and the wind took her where it took her until it was Tom Lake and you hit the kind of crisis point towards the end of the book then of her story where you're like, okay, now it would be really great if you made a decision for yourself.
Yeah,
Exactly.
she definitely allowed things to happen to her and just like went where she went. And
And she was happy, so it worked.
she was happy.
Right.
Yeah. She still kept a part of herself though, like even in those moments, because like you could obviously see that Peter Duke was like really taking advantage of her and
Mm-hmm.
was crazy, like she said, even though her daughters didn't want to call him that.
Yeah.
But he was like taking her down a very bad path, but she was still fighting it and being like, no, I don't want to drink an entire bottle of tequila on stage. No, I don't want to do this. And tried
Yeah.
to like wager her way down. That almost the Achilles tendon rupture is a good thing to happen to her because it saves her from herself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you see moments where like you see that she's a good person and that she actually, once she's put in these crisis situations, she's deciding very smartly things for her, where she's just like, nope, I'm done acting. You can't convince me otherwise. Nope, I'm gonna just do what I need to do. I'm gonna be with my grandmother as she dies. Like I'm going to be a solid person, but not someone that's
And
going
then
to
she
take it
lets
over.
Duke do things to her. Ugh, at the end.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was bad.
That's another thing. I do
Yeah.
like you see it in her grown, motherly self. Is like she is happy as can be to be on this, cherry farm that could fail at any minute with the man she loves and her three daughters. She's like, despite the like economical threats, despite the global pandemic, like my whole family is here and we're on the farm we love and I'm really happy. And like she's so content in some simplicity that you understand she never should have been an actress. Like she loves the simple life and is happy.
Right. Yeah, I agree with the things you guys have said. I think also part of it is just that, again, like no internet, like not really any TV, like barely TV. Your world was just so small. And I think you can tell when she's younger, she doesn't know what she wants. And so, but she knows she doesn't want to just be a stay-at-home mom with anyone that she has met now. Like she's just sort of like trying to kick the adult can down the line because she didn't have that many options. And she's like, I haven't seen the life that I want yet. And so she ends up just kind of getting sucked into acting by accident. And then she just kind of goes with it because she's like, I don't really have any other options. Like, it's this or I stay at home with my grandma, right? Like, I don't have career options or I don't have a career that I want to do. And so she just kind of does that until she realizes that it's definitely not what she wants. And then she kind of ends up finding something else later.
Well, and Aunt Patchett's really smart in how she wrote the kids, which is kind of our next question is about the three girls. But Nell is there as an aspiring young actress to show you how not meant for acting her mother is. She's always like, you did what? With who? What? Like, and
Mhm.
like you see like the difference in how Lara's just kind of being pushed along into these opportunities and is like, sure, why not? And then how like people like now her daughter are like working for every minute to get that. And how in the end you kind of do need a little bit of motivation to climb the ladder or else you just like don't.
Right. I loved the kids. I did think Emily's character was kind of crazy. Like I
Very
have never,
dislikable.
yes. I thought she was likable the way she was in present tense, but
With
then
her
you
dad.
learn
Yeah.
about all these like insane delusions that she had as a kid. And I honestly have not really ever met a child that committed so hard to a delusion. And so thought it was really almost weird because everything else in the book felt really natural to me. And then that delusion ends up being part of the ending, which we can debate because it was very, I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about that part of the ending. But yeah, I loved the kids in general and I liked their relationships with each other. It felt like very realistic sister dynamics to me.
Oh
And
yeah.
I liked reading them like ribbing each other and making fun of each other and like making jokes with each other. It like made me smile and laugh as I was reading.
Ganging up on the parents.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
And I like that Maisie and Nell defended their mother and was like,
Mhm.
yeah, like Emily, you're being a bitch. Like they couldn't tell you this story because you were just psychotic and no one wanted to be around you. Yeah, I agree. Emily was very unlikable in her childlike state. And it almost made you question how she got to her adult state because like she seemed to not want to be on the farm. She seemed to not want her parents to be her parents, and yet now she's the one that's expected to take over the
she's
farm.
the dutiful older child who stepped up to help and fell in love with the boy next door. So she's not going anywhere. Her
Yeah.
relationship with her dad is what redeemed her entirely.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, not a fan of Emily. Also, you named her after this character you played for years and don't want her to ask questions about that period of your life. What?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it was she didn't want her to ask questions as much as like thinking Duke was her dad was crazy.
Well,
And of course,
almost not crazy, but
yeah,
Yeah,
in a
that was crazy.
way.
that was sort of what I feel like you were waiting for at the end was the answer. Like, well, was he? Which, like, I never thought he really was, but that was kind of the one, like, you wanted to know how that summer ended, but also your question was
Yeah.
kind of like, wait, are they telling the story because he is her dad? Like,
Yeah.
that was kind of the question overhanging the book once you figured out her weird obsession.
Yeah.
Right. Because they tell you even in the book that the timeline doesn't work, that like Emily came
Yeah.
around years after Duke. But it does feel, you can tell the whole time that there's something the main character isn't telling you, which is true. There is something she's not telling you until the very end.
Well, and she's already saying, like, I'm leaving out the sex and stuff of the story. And so there's things she's withholding. So you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, what else are you withholding?
Mm-hmm.
But you can also tell she loves her husband and
Right.
Yes.
is happy with her life and is happy that she's not with Duke.
And Duke was never painted as likable.
No. She
So
loved him because
it
he
was a
was the it
summer
guy
fling.
and he
Yeah.
was charming, but he was not a good person and he treated her very badly.
It's Greece. Summer loving happens so fast, like, and she talks about like
Yeah.
a day at, as summer stock is like a month in the real world, kind of thing. We all had summer camp crushes and stuff. It felt like the biggest thing ever. And then a week later, you're home and you forgot about them.
Right. Right.
That's true.
Stone cold Caitlin.
Dodged many bullets there.
Period.
Okay. So we've talked about this a little bit, but I loved the setting. I loved the Michigan cherry farm. It seemed so beautiful. Like, I love an idyllic little country present tense. I thought it was great. And I also thought Tom Lake was a really good setting too. Like, two very just like beautiful, important places.
The setting was almost its own character because the story, actual human characters fell so deeply in love with it, and it was so beautiful to read about. And like the lake, is where they spent their time, or the tennis court. Like there were just these parts that became really important to the story. So the setting was almost like another character.
Yeah. And the fact that they had to spend so much time on the orchard picking the cherries because they can't have any workers because it's COVID. And so like it was like their bonding moment is to like help this farm because this is their life, this is their livelihood, and this is their home. And they love it despite all the complaints. I also love the moment when it was revealed that Joe is Nelson and that
Yes.
That was the best reveal.
I didn't expect it. I really
I
didn't
didn't either. I felt so stupid after. I was like,
I had no reason to expect it. I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, because he did mention, he was like, yes, her and she was the best Emily. Like, so he obviously had seen Peter Duke, had met him, and has obviously met her during her Tom Lake run. So I was like, when is he going to show up? Does he be an audience member? Like, when is he showing up? The reveal
that was
happens.
Kind of one of the other overhanging questions, like, how does she end up with Joe?
Yes. The whole time I was waiting for him to appear, just like you're saying, Catherine. And then you realize you're like, oh, you actually met him already and you just didn't know.
The whole time.
Yeah.
And he also could have had a career in show business that he put aside for his family farm. And you're like, how on earth did you find these two peas in a pod who left show business to run a cherry farm?
And that's why they're soulmates.
And like the moment when her kids are just like, wait, you finally made it to the farm. The first time you were at the farm was with Peter?
Yeah.
Yep.
That was part of it too, is that like, as I've gotten older, I've become more curious about my parents' lives before they were parents. And I loved the kind of idea of discovering so many things about your mom, right? Like, my mom never dated a superstar, at least not that she's shared with me. But it's kind of interesting and fun to think about her finally telling the whole story because her kids are now old enough to kind of interpret the kind of bigger details. And then learning things about her they didn't even know, that like her name was originally Laura and then she shortened it to Lara.
Yeah. It's kind of so cool. And then like, that there's that moment where they all fall in love with the cherry orchard and the place. And Joe showing her around, and he invited her on a date, even though she invited 3 other people.
Yeah.
It's just so cute and wholesome.
They're soulmates, and they find each other in a theater in New York or whatever.
Yeah, the serendipity of that.
Yeah, if you want to be real cheesy, it's kind of like the book they spent trying to save the cherry farm, but in the end, the cherry farm saved them,
Yeah.
Very cheesy.
And the fact that Peter Duke saved the cherry farm by buying a plot of the cemetery.
That was
That was crazy.
interesting.
That
And
was
that's where
crazy.
I feel like I had a lot of things at the end. I was like, I'm gonna need more about this. And then it ended. I was like kind of pissed.
Right. Okay. So a big part of this book, which we've talked about a little bit already, is Our Town. Yeah, it's this sad play about this girl, Emily, who's an overachiever and then doesn't really escape her small town and ends up dying in childbirth. So depressing. But reality for a lot of women, right, who have potential and then at this time weren't able to turn that into anything, just became, not that it's bad to become a housewife, but did that not really by choice. Um, so yeah, I think none of Catherine evidently knows Our Town, but me and Caitlin didn't. What did you guys think of the play and it being such a central part to the story?
You guys know the time period it's set in?
No.
So the town is in New Hampshire, Grover's Corner, from 1901 to 1913. So Emily is the smartest kid in class, the brightest kid in class, marries the boy next door. But on her wedding day, she's just kind of like, Dad, take me away. You always said you were my favorite daughter. Like, don't make me do this almost. And then she dies in childbirth to her second child. And it's kind of like this depressing story of her being trapped in this town despite being so bright and so smart. And this was all that she was made out to be, was a mother.
So I got the gist of that from the book. I feel like there was a layer I was missing because of how revered like the stage manager was by all the characters in the book and stuff like that. Like I feel like there's things I missed, but I got the gist. I would have liked to get more from it, but like you're right, I didn't need to have seen the play. I just kind of wish I did, so I got this like other layer. Um Also like what a depressing thing to build your entire personality and career around. And then name your first child after it and be shocked when she doesn't want children. Like,
I mean, okay, so I get it because I feel like we all have characters that we just love, love, love. Like for me, reading Joe from Little Women was the first time that I was like read a character and I was like, this is me. And so I feel like when that happens, like I would totally name my child Joe if I had a child. Um, and not even expect her to care about Little Women or like give a fuck about any of that, but just to be like, this character was such an inspiration for me. Let's pass it on. So I don't think that's, weird or crazy, but um I agree that I do feel like there were subtleties that I missed because I hadn't read or seen Our Town. However, I didn't think I necessarily needed it. I feel like it's kind of like James that we read. Like if you hadn't read Mark Twain, there are things you definitely wouldn't get, but also you could enjoy the book without that.
mhm.
Yeah. I mean, the stage manager is the main character. That is the main character of Our Town. Because it's more than just George and Emily and the love and tragedy. It's about the town itself. The town is a character in itself, and it's all of the side characters. It's all of the life and death. It's about death and about eternity and how you live forever on in a town. But it's also a tragedy in the sense that, like, I believe the end of the play ends with George crying over Emily's grave and her watching on as one of the dead joining in the cemetery. So, I mean, yeah, it's about love, it's about marriage, it's about death and eternity. It's a very like basic play just about a town.
A
You're pitching
Town.
it really well there.
Our
I
Town.
know. I know. I've never seen it in its entirety or seen like someone actually like act it out because I don't think it's a very popular play.
Yeah, sounds
At least in
depressing.
Texas. At least in Texas, it's not very popular. I've never seen like a flyer for playing Our Town.
It's like in high school, our AP Lit class took us to see Death of a Salesman. I was like, why do people enjoy this? That is, Anyway, that's why I prefer musicals. They're songs.
Yeah, I agree.
Period.
Um, I don't know if this is true or not, but my sense is also that Our Town had its moment several decades ago. Like,
Definitely in New Hampshire.
right, right. Um, and I having been to New Hampshire now, it made so much more sense to me, the connection people had to this play. I was like, yeah, this feels extremely New Hampshire.
Well, and like they don't have a lot of, famous things
Yeah.
grip onto,
The whole state is very rural. I think the largest city has like
Right.
150,000 people in it.
Like Missouri, we got Mark Twain.
You
So
hang on to that.
make it our identity,
Yeah.
like
A Mark Twain literature class.
that's
So did
kind of
I.
it.
Yep. Okay. So the fucking villain of this book, Peter Duke, what did you guys think of that and of him?
I wish she had fallen in love with Sebastian. What a nice guy.
Me too. I'm so sad it wasn't
Team
Sebastian.
Sebastian.
But also I do love Joe.
Yeah.
Also, when Joe said, "Oh, you've met Palace" at the beginning, like something like that was foreshadowing. I was like, I love Palace right now, but I know something's gonna be up. And so that made me sad.
But I felt bad for Palace because she got sucked into his orbit and she couldn't hold her own. She couldn't say no to these things. So she did some very self-destructive things and ended up fizzling out.
And Peter Duke the whole time was giving me a young version of the dad from Malibu Rising.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, he was in it for himself. He only slept with Laura because he wanted a better room because she was there. She was pretty for the summer. And then he used her injury to get her out of there and get her agent to his play. Like, it was so selfish. And every time you thought maybe there was redeeming quality about him, you're like, never mind, now he's getting wasted on stage. Or he's, like, it was just always, the good and bad balanced out so evenly that you came up with zero.
Yeah, I hated him, of course. I like, though, that in the book, he's still not the villain to Lara. I think that's a real sign of maturity because he really treated her badly, like as badly as a man can treat a woman, and used her, abused her. And she was able to just see him for what he was, which is an unstable, selfish person that could not help himself and was deeply unhappy his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wasn't the villain because she was like, I'm happy and he's not. And I learned lessons from him that allowed me to be happy. And I think that's like amazing. However, it's so hard to watch young Lara stay with him. And you get it because he's charming and he's attractive and he's like the it guy. But it's also like you see things she doesn't see because she's young and naive and wants to love him.
Yeah.
And it's also been like a month and a half. Like it's a summer romance. And she kind of acknowledges like, I don't want to leave because I don't want to be an actor in Hollywood anymore because I found I love rural Michigan. And she's like, and I have friends for the first time and people I enjoy spending time with despite Peter having ditched her. Like she was still happy in that place. So that was interesting at the end when she didn't want to leave. But
it was crazy that like her and Joe never crossed paths again, like basically. And she didn't say goodbye, didn't like, yeah.
And her kids are like, wait, but like,
Dad,
when did you meet him? We thought you met him at Tom Lake. She's like, well, I met him at Tom Lake.
but we reconnected.
Right.
A play in New York.
I did kind of love that too, because I feel like some books feel the pressure of like making that one coming of age story everything, and like every part of your future happens in that moment. And that's not true. Like every character who becomes important is at Tom Lake, but the story isn't done until years after when coincidences happen and more things happen and life happens. And so I thought that was good that,
Yeah. And I loved her going back to New Hampshire for her grandmother. And I love moments with her and her grandmother being like, I felt a lump, but never went to a doctor about breast cancer and how scary that is. And like her taking care of her grandmother until she died and then selling the house. And then basically she didn't want to be a seamstress at a play, but that's a job. And she took the job. And serendipity that the director was Joe. And they fell in love at first sight, which is, I can believe it in this one because they knew each other and they had been through so much with his family's farm and her crushing summer fling and her failing as an actress. But now that they're like kind of figuring themselves out and Joe knows he's going to go back to Michigan and she's been to this farm, so she knows what it is and knows what to expect. it just kind of all fell into place and the stars aligned, and you just loved Joe even more.
When I like her and Joe looking back and being like, maybe that is the beginning of our love story when we like look back at it finally in depth. Like maybe after all, like that is what would have happened had not like fate intervened and separated them. And that was kind of interesting to see. And Joe's like, no, I think like I was always in love, at that point. And she's like, maybe I started to feel it,
Right.
because she didn't really want them to go to the farm with her. They kind of invite them themselves. And,
Yeah.
and you even get like Peter Duke when he shows up to her door, he's like, who are you? Why are you here? And she's like, I was with you at the farm. Don't you remember? And he doesn't. And it's like the best day of both their lives that summer was at the farm. And he doesn't even remember that she was with him.
She doesn't remember that he doesn't remember she's the reason that he went to that farm.
Right.
Yeah. It's just it was so painful to hear that, but it's also just a great representation of the fact that he never saw her. He never really saw her as a human. She was just a girl who was there to him.
And she was, and the end was like, I actually don't need to rehash this with him. It is what it is. Like,
right. Like
he's here. What does he want? Let's find out.
And then Joe being like, let me take my daughter from you because you should not be holding my daughter right now. Like being very terrified and afraid. And like, she's just like, you have nothing to be afraid of. This dude is chaotic and crazy. And no.
Right. I also do fully believe that like the bad guy prepares you for the good guy. I think that's unfortunate, but I think many women go through that where if Lara and Joe had met that summer, she wouldn't have been ready for him. And the things that they went through, like when they met again later, they were mature and she could see people better for who they were and knew the value of someone who was kind like Joe. And so, one thing leads to another and it ended up leading to something good for her.
You wonder, though, like one of the kind of open-ended things is when he's holding Emily, Peter Duke, he's like, maybe I should get me one of these. And he like talked about never having kids because he was a liability. But at the same time, like he almost did have a kid, and would having a kid have saved him,
I don't think so.
I don't think
I would have think he would have been a terrible father.
My guess is it's something Laura thinks about.
We don't know if he died by accident or he committed suicide. And that's
and that's one of the open-ended questions I disliked. Thank you.
But how would Laura know the answer to that?
Yeah, she wouldn't know.
Sebastian knows the answer.
Does he?
Maybe. He might or might not.
He's with him always.
I don't know if he was there.
If you overdose, it could be on purpose and it could be an accident. Like, you don't necessarily know.
He swam off. Potentially.
But he could have just been swimming and was on drugs and was out of his depth and didn't know it.
Yeah.
Or it could have been on purpose. Like, I feel like
or
it's one of those.
He could have swam down to the bottom. Yes. That's that's the open-ended question, is whether or not he was suicidal.
Right. And so I don't think necessarily anyone does know.
Also, COVID shut down the movie industry. So there's that probably, it's assumed you realize. It would be really interesting, actually, I thought about this. 20 years from now, if someone picked up this book who didn't necessarily, maybe they're our age now, in 20 years, would they get it, Because the COVID pandemic is not, like, explained, and it never says the words really COVID. It just talks about
the pandemic
and distance and things. And I wonder, what the effectiveness of this book is for the next generation.
I think it's still effective. I think they'll have a different reading experience, though.
Right.
I would compare it to, like, me reading this book without reading Our Town. Like, I'm sure if you've seen Our Town, you have a different relationship to this book than I do because, there's subtleties there that you get and I don't. But so when we read the book, we live through the pandemic. There's things about that time we get and they don't, but they'll get the broad strokes that people were sick. And so everyone came home and they're together now when they wouldn't normally be.
But they're reading it without living through the pandemic or having seen Our Town.
Well, I think also they won't get why Peter Duke did what he did. They won't understand, like, why he was on a boat and, like, the fact that he was not busy and he could not do what he loved. And so therefore there's that question of,
And he was alone, and you see a lot of that started with that one play in Tom Lake drinking on stage.
Yeah. That was the part that felt so like the tiny thing in the moment becomes the big thing in the future, where I think about that a lot, where like anyone who's an addict, there's a moment of no return where they kind of accidentally walk down a path they don't even know that they're on. And that's what reading that scene felt like. If you have that pit in your stomach, if you know where this is going to go, and the characters don't in the moment.
Yep, I agree. Well, there are two other main characters for the Summer and Tom Lake that we haven't talked about. We've said their names. We have Pallas and Sebastian. Sebastian is Duke's older brother, who is an almost could have been tennis star who now teaches other people to play tennis at a country club. And Pallas is this kind of really spectacular Black woman who Laura is not used to seeing, like this kind of cultural mix. And she mentions that several times, but she is an exceptional dancer and singer in cabaret and understudying Laura, and they become friends. So, what are our thoughts on good old Pallas and Sebastian, who end up dating?
yeah.
I thought they were an odd pair. I actually think Pallas and Duke and Sebastian and Lara make more sense.
Oh, yes.
I love Sebastian. He's the best character in the book.
He says repeatedly he was the best of us.
Yes. And I think the implication is almost the reason the reason they knew each other was because of Duke, but the reason they couldn't be together was also because of Duke. Because, and even after like when Lara and Sebastian meet each other that one more time and they know that they could kind of maybe do something, you know, they could be together, they could sleep with each other, and then they don't. It's kind of already because like I think they both know that Sebastian is going to commit his life to Duke no matter what. And it's not a place where Lara wants to be. With Pallas, honestly, I kind of hate Pallas and what she did. She was a young, yeah, she was a terrible friend, but she was young herself and was used to being forced to be the understudy, even though she's very talented, because she was Black. So I understand her resentment. I understand her like kind of immaturity and how that would have played a role. I also think that like she was the only Black person there, and that must have been so hard. And so I feel
the actual stage manager was.
Yeah.
But, you know,
in the show,
acting.
In our town,
very much like majority white environment. And so I feel really bad for her just because I know it must have been really, really hard for her. But also I was like, but is Lara the person who should have had to pay the price for all that?
No.
But in the same time, you get the story at the beginning of her playing Emily for the first time because Laura did exactly that to Veronica.
Yes, yes.
And so she's kind of like, well, I've been there, so I can't be that mad.
Right. Which I liked too, that it's like, you know, when you're young and immature and you are in the moment, you make mistakes, and even good people do bad things.
And Peter Duke was a bad influence.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
he
that's
was getting her drunk on stage and making out with her for a play. So what did you expect to happen?
That's where I landed, where I was like, I'm mad at Pallas, but at the same time, I feel really, really bad for her because she doesn't have enough autonomy almost to like say no. Like she like just follows along and like allows for Peter's worst to influence her. And they talk about how she's losing a ton of weight and how she's like kind of becoming a shell of herself. Even though she's playing these parts really well, she's letting the parts consume her. And so I just ended up feeling bad for her because she wants so desperately to be like the main character, to be like this like really great actress. And she has the talent and has the skills for it, but she's being taken advantage of and her soul is being sucked out by Peter Duke and the part she's playing.
I do also think they never say this explicitly, at least I don't think they do. But Duke was already doing drugs, and I suspect that like Lara was always like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the weight loss thing made me think that he had, you know, kind of gotten Pallas to.
For sure.
Yeah. Which is sad.
Yep. And because of him, she fizzled out. So, I don't know. And I think To an extent, Laura's also not, Laura doesn't hold a grudge against Palace. And part of that's because her sitting there watching Palace in our town before even in the other play made her realize that, like, I can't play Emily forever. And this is what I've built my whole career on.
Mhm.
And this is my friend. And I don't, I feel some type of way about seeing my friend take this spot and be spectacular. But it also was kind of helping her come
Move
to the
on.
decision that, like, really this was never my thing and this is just proving it.
Right. Um, okay. So in addition to the pandemic, this book references climate change. It feels very kind of like in our political moment. What'd you guys think of that?
Felt like conversations I've had with my parents about if I want kids or not in the future.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I felt so bad for Joe because he definitely sees this as like, how am I going to continue the six? Because like this would be the sixth generation of cherry orchard farmers on this land, and like it's very much so all about the farm and saving the farm. And so when he first hears this news, he doesn't take it well because he's thinking, who will be the next generation to save this farm or to like help it and keep it in the family? Um, but it's definitely a conversation that I haven't seen in books really at all.
Hmm.
And that I really appreciated because I think a lot of, in our generation at least, is having these discussions with their
Mhm.
parents saying, like, all I am seeing in the future is death and seeing this planet die and us doing nothing about it. And so, therefore, why would I want to bring a child into this world? And I felt for Emily in that moment because I'm like, yeah, that's fair.
It's kind of like ultimately, like, the conversation is, yeah, you want to continue the family and tradition and, show your parents a kid you've had, but also at the same time, they won't be here forever. You're the one living with that, and
Hmm.
that kid is the one living with that decision. And so, like, that's kind of the push and pull of the conversation is, expectation versus future expectation. Like, I
Right.
don't know. It's a tricky topic, and it's one I think about very often.
I did also appreciate the discussion about like how badly you might want to do something for your parents and how that's just not a good enough reason.
Mhm.
I think a lot of women feel that way, where, you respect your parents and you love them and you want to give them the thing that they want and you want to see them have the joy of being a grandparent. You want to see them be able to fulfill that role. You also want, in some ways, to like carry on the traditions of your family and know that your family will continue on. But then you're also like, but the theory of that is different than like, do I want to be a parent?
Mhm.
And I thought I liked how it was portrayed in the book.
And I like that both her and Benny were on the same page, where they were
Hmm.
both like very like vocally saying, no, we're not having kids. Like, look at this. And Benny was thinking very much numbers being like, hey, there's only so long before the cherry season won't work here because of climate change. And we'll have to switch to something else until finally nothing will grow here. And he thought of it very practically and business focused, but like that he was supporting his fiance's decision. Um,
Hmm.
I really appreciated that.
It is interesting too, being written in by Anne Patchett, who is more of our parents' generation, when it's a conversation more people our age are having.
Yeah.
So she's definitely had this conversation with someone, someone younger. And I think it was super interesting to include because I think a lot of us in the pandemic, especially the prime of our 20s, were like, well, what will my future look like? Does it have to look like what I always thought it would?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now let's talk about that scene. We've all referenced it. Um,
I was like, girl, put your stockings back up.
Yeah.
yeah.
Why are you having sex in a mental hospital?
So I'm gonna set the scene. Duke is a little bit, it's been like a few years, like 2 years now. Um, and his star is rising. He's already kind of a starlet on the Hollywood scene. He ends up in a mental hospital, basically trying to get sober. And he calls her to come visit him. She goes. She doesn't really know what this is about, but she's curious to hear from him after all this time.
Fair.
And has kind of just, I don't know if I'd say she's even fully over the heartbreak, but she's at the part of the heartbreak where you're living your life again. And she goes to see him, and then she realizes that the only reason he called her is because he desperately wants to have sex with someone. And she realizes he's probably called every woman he's ever known to try to meet him here, to try to convince them to have sex with him in the bathroom. And she does it. Yeah, it was pretty crushing that she actually did it. What did you guys think?
Especially the position they did it in was very,
Just,
like, she was a shell of herself. Like, she wasn't even.
yeah,
I was sad for her in that moment.
Yeah.
so sad.
The
So,
only redeeming part
Seeing
was
Sebastian lessened it a little,
mhm.
but also when you realize that she ended up pregnant from that, it was just kind of sad. Like, he threw her to the wind, didn't care, used her to get to Hollywood, and then she was a booty call at a mental hospital. Like,
I didn't even remember her name.
yeah. He put her down as Emily Webb, like, from the play.
Yeah.
It was sad. And I think that was probably the last thing she needed to really move on. But at the same time, what a terrible way to have to realize that.
Mm-hmm. It was crushing. It made me so sad she did it. I wanted her to leave that bathroom so fast and walk out those doors. But I agree with you, Caitlin. To me, it felt like this was her first heartbreak with someone she loved, and it ended really poorly. And I think she went because she wanted to just have more closure and resolution to that summer.
I would have been curious too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
I don't think I would have pulled my panties down.
Oh, no, I would have left. I would have left.
Yes.
But I think the reason she does it is almost like it was so hard for her to say no to him. And I wonder if she almost felt like this is the conclusion. Like, this is just the last thing, or this is like us saying goodbye to each other.
Getting it out of her system.
And almost just like, also like, I'll let you treat me like this one more time. Like, I'm going to be this person.
So many things in this book just happened to her.
Yeah. Like, this is, to me, it almost felt like this is the last time I'm going to be this person who allows you to be this way. And then you almost immediately get the total foil of Sebastian, where it's like Duke is never able to treat her as a human. And Sebastian is the nice guy who is like actually good to her and sees her as a person.
And probably knows what just happened in there.
Yeah, or knows at least what he tried to do.
Yeah.
No, I wish she had left, but I also think it's kind of realistic that she stayed. And then I think that was kind of the last straw, and that is ultimately why.
Well, it makes
that allowed her to fully close the book on Duke and be like, this is bad for me, and I'm not this person anymore.
That's the final scene with Duke that we see, but the time jump, there was a scene before where he meets her kids and says, I could get me one of these. And it makes that scene even more icky that he doesn't remember her.
Correct.
I think that's actually after, isn't it?
No.
Nope.
No, because when
she has
sees
3 kids when he comes.
Yeah, so that when he visits, oh, I see what you're saying. Sorry. Yeah, it makes it even more icky because we had
read that prior to this scene happening.
Right.
And that's what I mean. I didn't.
And he's like, I should get me one of these. And you're like, well, you almost had one if she hadn't been,
and then
secure enough in herself too.
Because he's just like, who are you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you called her to a mental hospital for a booty call. Like, how could you not remember her?
You knocked her up, actually, after sleeping with her for an entire summer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, I still go back and forth on that scene because I think it's realistic, but I also hate it. And I understand, too, why she did it. Like, I don't understand, but I also do. Because that's just who she was with him.
Old ways.
And, like,
yeah.
It was almost like she needed to just, like, prove to herself that that really was who he was. And then that really was who he was.
Yeah. On a divorce, like in the process of a divorce from his wife, about to lose his job because he's an alcoholic. And she's kind of like, well, that's no different than he was.
Right. Just, but I wish she had left. And then she has an abortion. And then it kind of makes this whole obsession that her child has with him seem so insane. Like that she's convinced he's her dad when she, could have had a child with him and then didn't.
Correct. Chose not to.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad she did not have a child with him.
Yes. I'm
I
so
think
glad
she's
Emily
fun
was
too.
not his child.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, I would have loved an Laura Sebastian romance. However, Joe is the perfect person for her.
Right.
And
Love.
that would have ruined
Right.
that and that kind of bittersweet ending when they kind of adopt Sebastian into the family, which was very wholesome and I
It was
enjoyed.
so wholesome.
It
The
is
hole by
weird
the
that
grave
Peter
site was
Duke's
great.
buried in their family cemetery,
It is weird.
It's
It
weird.
is weird.
but it saved the farm, so it's okay. I don't know.
I know. Because to me, it was just like the love of Sebastian's life was always going to be Duke, which is
Mhm.
why they could never be together. Because Lara doesn't just want to follow Duke around the way Sebastian is just going to follow Duke around and take care of Duke. Um, but I liked that it all kind of came around in the end, and it feels like Sebastian was like finally going to get his happy ending, even though it came because his brother's gone.
Yep.
Yep.
Sad, but so good.
Yes. It ends happy.
It does. It does.
Yeah, I just had questions about Duke's death and more about how Laura and Joe like really ended up being together. Like I would have loved more of their story, but I guess that's not the point of the book. And
Right.
I also want to know like I was hoping the end would be a Benny Emily wedding and it wasn't. So I was kind of like, wait, what happens to everybody? And that also kind of frustrated me, which that was more understandable than I feel like I was just missing some explanations I wanted about Peter and Laura.
Right. Fair enough. Um, but I really liked, I mentioned this at the beginning, but I feel like most coming of age stories are about someone's like loss of innocence as being like depressing and crushing and like they just never look at the world the same again. But I liked it, this one. I think all that stuff is true, but that's what made room for the happy ending. And so I like that it didn't just view a person's loss of innocence as a bad thing. It was like, this is necessary to make good choices for yourself so that you can have a happy life.
And she saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was a very wise old woman who was just like, I've lived a life that there's good and bad, but the bad led me to the good. So I can't be unhappy about it.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Do you guys have book recommendations?
I do, because I think this book pairs very well with a Kristen Hanna book, The Woman.
Ooh.
The Women
Okay.
is very similar in the sense of like a young adult's journey through life. This time it's at war in Vietnam, and it follows her all the way into her older adult life. And so I think it's, if you like Tom Lake, you'll probably like The Women.
I'm actually gonna go for Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm gonna say Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
Good choice.
Also
Yeah.
about a starlet with kind of a secret past no one really knew about, and she's telling her story. Definitely different, but was giving me these vibes the whole time. And there were Peter Dukes present in the book for sure, because I mentioned the father from Malibu Rising. He is one of them in Evelyn Hugo's story.
Yeah. I feel like Taylor Jenkins Reid does a very similar, almost like slice of life type story. So I think that's a good author to follow up with if you liked this book. So I'm gonna do something kind of random, blast from the past. One of our earlier Busy Girls episodes. I'm glad my mom died. Um, I'm recommending that because it's the story of a young starlet, Jeanette McCurdy, who was obviously an iCarly star when we were young. And it's kind of about her journey and figuring out what she wants because she also sort of ended up being a child star almost by accident and more so by the wishes of her mom. And so she kind of reclaims her life throughout the story and figures out what she wants to do, and finds her own independence. But also, like, obviously, the purpose of the book is that her mom was abusive and then her mom dies. And Jeanette McCurdy has this sort of complex grief about it because she loved her mom, but her mom was bad for her. And now she can kind of heal now that her mom's gone. And I kind of felt that way about Duke. Like, he had to die to set Sebastian free, and Lara had to finally move on from him in order to have a happy life. And
So she could tell the full story.
Right. So, yeah, I think there's some similar themes there. I'm glad my mom died.
Okay. All good recommendations, all past Busy Girl books.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, go find them, listen to them. I think that's pretty much it then. You can find us at Busy Girls Pod anywhere you're on social media, busygirlspod.com if you want to see these book recommendations or past ones. Say you decide to read Seven Husbands and want another rec, we have that for you. And then let us know if there's more books you want us to read. We love taking recommendations. If you see something all over your book talk feed, our book talk feeds are all a little bit different, so like let us know. And yeah, if you have the time, please rate and review wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Sweet. I'm Casey.
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Catherine. Thanks for listening. And when you get a chance, take a break with the Busy Girls Book Club.